Could you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Sheila Ochugboju, spelled Ochugboju. I am a scientist. I trained in biochemistry. I have a PhD in biochemistry, but that was over 20 years ago. And then I went into international development work, and I'm currently working with UN Environment. And we've recently launched the network of African Women Environmentalists to support women environmentalists across the continent.
And why you're here this time? UNFCCC event?
I'm here in this conference specifically because I'm also a futures practitioner. I've done a lot of work helping people to imagine different futures based on current drivers. So we're really looking at how you take futures thinking into practice in development scenarios, helping communities reimagine better futures, and therefore to look back to make better decisions today.
So you're from Kenya?
I'm actually Nigerian, but I do a lot of work in Kenya. But I've also worked in Ghana, I've worked in Egypt, South Africa, Jordan, many countries.
Oh, okay. So you're international.
I am, yes.
I have some question about the UBI, Universal Basic Income. Have you
Yes.
heard of it?
I have heard of it, and I know that they were testing it several years ago in Kenya as well as in the developed world. I understand that it did very well in Kenya in that people developed a basic level of safety nets, which is not there from public funds. So therefore that allows people to make different decisions and build resilience and to structure their lives differently. And so I think in the developing world context, universal basic income works really well because we have fewer safety nets than you have in the developed world. But I also know that in the developed world context, I can't remember which country, whether it's Sweden or I can't remember exactly.
Finland just finished for
Yes.
2 years of experiment.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But I understood that their finding was that it didn't help. People enjoyed it, they liked it, it gave them more freedom to explore different possibilities, but it didn't help them re-enter work, and it didn't particularly expand their opportunities, although it enhanced their sense of well-being and helped them to thrive in perhaps intangible ways. But I feel that whenever you help people enhance their well-being and to thrive, you may not see the effects immediately, but that resilience in seeing your capacity to embrace change will allow you in future to make bigger decisions than you could have made because your feeling of safety.
I read the report, and report was actually, Gila report was positive, and people found same level of jobs as the control group.
Yes,
so
that's my point. They didn't find more better jobs.
And they're going to publish the full report in 2020.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my point is, I think perhaps it takes more time to see the full impact of it. Because I feel when people, the resilience that is built from not being afraid that you'll fall off, the financial ladder, perhaps shows up years later when you're faced with different options. Perhaps not straight away, because your options don't expand immediately, but they may expand in 3 or 4 years' time. You may be more ambitious in your ideas and dreams.
So have you talked to people in Kenya where they sort of feel happier to have the UBI rather than...
I personally haven't talked to any. So I've not met anybody that was a part of that test group experiment. I think it was quite a small group. But we have talked about it broadly in other groups, saying, is this a good thing? Would you welcome it? And I don't know anybody that wouldn't welcome it in a developing world. We just don't have the same welfare systems. And you're generally looking at your family or other support systems. And so there's nobody that wouldn't welcome it. Because where else would you turn to when you are not able to make a living? You become a burden on family and community. So your sense of dignity is enhanced by some other place that allows you space and time to regain your financial footing.
Yeah, with the Millennium Project, we've been doing the research on this UBI, and we think that by 2030 or 2035, half of the nations will have this UBI.
Yeah.
You think it will be the timeline, 2030, something like?
2030 is just 11 years, which is two or so cycles of government in Africa. And looking at how our cycles of governments are going, I am not hopeful that would happen in 2030. I just do not see that happening. Because if that was going to happen in 2 cycles,
yeah,
we
it's
would have
half of the nations. So Africans will come
it would have
later.
I
Yeah.
think it not in Africa. No, I'm
No.
not seeing that as a trend. It's not a conversation.
But Europeans will do, right?
I think Europeans are doing it because they're looking
They're
at different
doing it.
income models for welfare.
I know.
Yeah, and in the
They're
UK especially.
They're basically trying to pay less.
Well, they are paying less. Look at the
Yeah.
UK. You
Yeah.
know how they've brought in the universal credit, and most people are very unhappy about universal credit. But the idea behind it was that you control the money, but I feel the vulnerabilities that is that people are not just financially stressed. That's one vulnerability, but they also have many other vulnerabilities: health vulnerabilities, addictions, family breakdown. All of those things affect why they're on welfare, disability. So just giving somebody money without equipping them in many other ways as to handling it and as to prioritizing whether I spend it on cigarettes or alcohol or whatever doesn't give you resilience. So there are other things. So I think in countries such as the UK and other developed world, where we have enough data to see how people's behavior changes on different sources of welfare, I'm not sure that this necessarily addresses the core vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I'm also very much involved in blockchain AI sectors, and I represent about 18 different blockchain AI companies and industries and organizations. And there are 3 I've known sort of groups who are trying to implement UBI tokens, UBI blockchain systems. And I think with that tokens, I mean, it'll make people, get paid easier or life better. What do you think?
I feel that anything, and this in the developing world context, in the developing world context, giving people more agency with their lives is always a plus. So instead of giving them welfare tokens or aid tokens or food parcels or anything that gives them agency to decision making, definitely is an improvement, because that's what is usually the weakness. So I like that. Where we're thinking about blockchain and AI in Kenya, because actually there's a government group in Kenya dealing with blockchain and AI. 2 of my friends are on this government group. Wow. But they're looking at it for blockchain for electoral transparency, and so bringing it into helping our electoral systems, to sort out all the problems we have with our elections and corruption and having to do a recount.
Elections,
So in electoral systems, blockchain is in fact, the next Kenyan election is going to have blockchain technology being used. So it's being talked about on a national level. Yeah.
Also, is it Kenya that leapfrogged instead of having
MPesa, mobile phones? Yes.
Yeah,
it's
mobile
an amazing
what
technology.
Is it called?
MPesa.
How do you
so
spell
mobile
it?
money?
How do you spell it?
MPESA.
MPESA.
M for the mobile. Pesa means money in Swahili.
Pesa is money.
So mobile money.
Really?
It's an amazing technology.
Could you tell us about MPesa? That is very interesting.
MPesa is a revolutionary technology, and it's been around, I think, for about 15 years now. And it started off, it was actually an experiment. It was a development experiment about how people could transfer money. But why it's a showcase for Kenya is because government looked at the regulatory system, so they changed that immediately. So telecoms worked with banks, worked with governments to bring about the legislation, to bring about the technology, to look at the legal frame, everything in order to create this ability of people to transfer money to each other from anywhere. And it's now East Africa, so Tanzania and Uganda have it as well. It's absolutely fantastic because you can send money on any type of phone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. You can use it on old what you call dumb phones. And so, and the places where you can get the money are like kiosks. So it's not a bank. So it's like a woman sitting on the side corner with an umbrella. You'll be able to give her $10. She will put the $10 on your phone. You will now send the $10 to your cousin in the village, and your cousin in the village will use that money immediately, instantly. It's amazing. But now what's wonderful about it is it's had enough time to transition. So not only are we sending money, we're saving on it, getting loans on it, all kinds of developments using MPesa. The beauty of it is it has allowed more people to enter into financial systems. So, Africa had
underbanked or unbanked people are using this M-Pesa.
Yeah, at one point we had 80% of Africans were unbanked because you don't have papers, you don't have birth certificate, all those things that banks need. You don't have collateral. But now you don't need anything except your identity card so people don't need banks anymore, really. And so you can use it to pay the guy for chewing gum, and you can use it to pay your rent. You can use it to pay your mortgage. You can do everything from M-Pesa. I absolutely love it.
So M-Pesa is owned by the government or the organization or company?
No, it's actually on one telecom called Safaricom. The government subsidizes it, and now they're beginning to get what they call interoperability. So other telecoms, you can now send money using Airtel and some of the others. But in the beginning, it was just Safaricom. But the government supported it largely. It was a government-based project. And it was about bringing in the unbanked and about financial inclusion, which it has done. And all the research now shows that not only that, but it has actually reduced poverty at a real critical level, because people just have more agency with their money. They're able to do business easier, and transactions are much easier. So that social divide there is when you go to a market and you want to buy some beads and they can't take your credit card, or you don't. Now there's an equalization. You have M-Pesa, I have M-Pesa. You're working in the corner, I'm a banker, but we both use the same currency, the same platforms for transactions. There's a way in which intangibly it has changed how people create hierarchies of value depending on how they transact. You know what I mean? Bigger people have gold cards and little people have coins. But we don't have those things.
Yeah, with the M-Pesa, you have a poor-rich gap.
That's it.
Sort of, it's not widened, it's a shortened.
It's shortened. But it's also a perception gap is closed, because it's not a system that is only used by poor people, it's used by everybody, and it's used for small transactions and bigger transactions. So immediately it's not a poor thing.
So if it's a mobile sort of money, you can do the mobile voting. Do you do a mobile voting too? Or
not so
not
much.
Yet?
I mean, no, Kenya is probably one of the most advanced African countries in terms of voting, because they have biometric. They brought in the last election the biometric sensors for you to. But even then, that did not stop corruption and disputes about electoral irregularities, which is why we're now moving to blockchain. So, I guess my personal feeling about it is that technology does not inherently change human behavior. You apply it wrong. It really does.
Long term.
It's a very long term thing. So my personal feeling, having lived in the UK and in Kenya, is like, in the UK, which could have technology of biometric, you only need a voting card, with your name on it. You go there, you give it to the person you vote. In Kenya, you need biometric this, you need your ID, you need to be on the register, and yet there's a dispute in Kenya with the higher technology. And how many times do you have a dispute in the UK? So I think it's not about technology per se, it's about something else. I'm not really convinced at this point that blockchain is going to solve the problem, because I feel there's a bigger problem that we haven't really looked at.
So, could you tell us again about your organization and your, challenges for this climate change and environmental improvements?
Okay, the organization I'll talk about is the one that's been newly launched, called the Network of African Women Environmentalists, NAWE. And it's really about how women are very much involved in the environment, in that especially in Africa, they're the ones that farm the land, they're the ones that are the nurturers, and they're the ones that are most impacted by climate change. And yet they're the ones that have less access to the resources. They don't own the land, they can't get the inputs. And so there is no way we're going to build resilient communities unless we support women, to be women environmentalists, to become more resilient. And when there are disasters, research shows that they're 14 times more likely to die or be injured by disasters. So women have less resilience in all kinds of vulnerable environments than men. So we do feel that resilience is a gender issue. You need to look at the gender dimension of every aspect of future resilient futures. So yeah, that's what we intend to do, to build up a network which is an action-led network across the continent of women in the environment. We'll share learning, we will do a lot of projects, and we will bring this cross-fertilization of ideas and models and networks. That's
very good. Okay. Okay. 16 minutes. Final.
You can
any
edit.
final? Yeah, it's okay. Any final sort of comments to Koreans,
Yes.
like Korean women, or perhaps?
Well, I'm first of all, I'm thrilled to be in Songdo. I had read about it, a future city. We're always looking at future cities and what makes a city, resilience and all of that. So for me to come and see it is really interesting. There are a number of things we can learn. But also Korea as a role model for a leapfrog economy has always been there. So in Africa, we're always fascinated with how did Koreans do it? How did they move their economy? How are they building this kind of resilience in their societies? And so what I've seen, and I've only been here a few days, I see a highly disciplined people. There's discipline in everything. It shows in the way the city is built, in the way people behave, in the way systems appear to function. And I'm curious as to where that inherent personal and societal discipline arises from, and how we as African countries and societies can learn from that and to build that, because I feel that without that, the backbone for resilience isn't there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.